Hello, AP Statistics students. This is Mr. Rainsberg. Mr. Medicals and I put together a few hints, tips, reminders, and resources over chapters 9 and 10, which deal with significance tests. Now, before we begin, today is Wednesday, May 20th, which means Friday, May 22nd is right around the corner, and that is the day of your AP Statistics exam, which starts at 2 p.m. Please sign into the College Board site by 1:30 so you can be placed in the waiting room. Have all your material ready for those. All right, on Schoology, you have this is our folder, and step 1, 2, 3, 4 are there. Step 1 holds these videos and the Google Slides, so you can click any active links in this presentation. Step 2 are the amazing exam prep resources on there. We've talked about those throughout these weeks, but I really want to draw attention to the pictures of the classroom posters. Mr. Nichols went into his classroom and took pictures of all the posters. They are outlined for you. Those are great review things to look over before the exam. Step 3 are practice naming that inference test. You can look at prompts and determine which test or confidence interval you're supposed to use. And step 4 are more mock exams if you want to practice those on it. All right, so first we received an email from Stats Medic. They posted a blog about the resources that they think students should have ready before they take the 2020 AP Stats exam. You can click this link or you can type it in and you can see what they think is going to be helpful for you on Friday for it. Now we begin. Chapter 9 deals with significance tests, dealing with one sample on it. Chapter 10 looks at comparing two populations. We look at two sample tests on them. So these are the two main chapters in this video we're going to cover on it. And this is probably one of the most important resources you should really be looking at if there's a specific topic that you struggle with in chapters 9 and 10. It's our AP free response questions database, our spreadsheet that we have linked there for you. If I really struggle with type 1 and type 2 errors, I mean, I could just look at the topics and go see and read practice questions and scoring guidelines on them, and I could see what I need help on. If I struggle with matched pairs, I can look at the 2007 test on it. Experimental design, 2008 Form B. There's a lot of ways you can pinpoint specific things that you struggle with on them so you can get some help on those specific topics. So please use that resource as well for it. So let's begin. On the 2008 Form B, question 4. This one deals with designing a study based off the prompt that compares two treatments, and then even describing a type 1 and type 2 error given that context, and also consequences of them. So really what this question is trying to analyze is the purpose of it is to determine, can you as a student design an experiment that compares two treatments, and can you as a student identify the associated potential type 1, type 2 errors and decide which of these two would be more serious for it. This is the goal they're trying to assess in this question. So if we look at part A, designing a study for it, there are three types of designs you could use: a paired, a matched pairs, or completely randomized. Now, based off of some questions I received this week from some students, I only highlighted the matched pairs design. The people were struggling with trying to figure out, how do I write matched pairs, or how do I tell the difference in matched pairs? And so if you were to read the first sentence, what they're doing is they're telling you what they're going to do, how they're going to assign the people to the two groups randomly on it. So they do address the randomization in the first sentence. The second sentence for group 1, they are now defining what group one is, and the subjects that are going to be in there and what it's going to be. And then they also do the same thing for group 2. Notice they're also describing the subtraction after minus before. They're looking at the change, and they also are writing down how it is being subtracted. So that's important. Even down here, we're looking at for the difference, music minus noise free on it. So we do see a match pairs design. You can read through that to see what is needed. I do like how they address the randomization in part 1. And now in part B here, they have type 1 error and they define it. Type 2 error, they define it. And then they ask, well, which one is more serious? And so they go through these. And that's the part to realize when you're reading this question. It's a good question because you're asked type 1, there's 1, there's 2, describe a type 1 error, describe a type 2 error, consequences of each. So there's 4 things you need to answer. And then why is one more serious? This is really 5 questions that you have to answer here. So make sure you understand what's a type 1 error and what's a type 2 error. Be able to have consequences for each when you are asked, and then be able to discuss which of these is more serious for it. So if I look at the 2004 exam, question 5 on this one is looking at modern tie dogs and golden jackals, and they're looking at the length of the mandible, the jawbone measure for each animal, because who doesn't want to know the details of that? Now, here you have the quartiles, the medians, the upper quartiles. Looks like you have a 5-number summary, and you have the idea of the numbers below Q1 and the numbers above Q3. Part A asks you to draw a parallel box plots of them. So that's not a chapter 9 and 10, but I just want to draw attention. Make sure you're labeling which box plot is which. Make sure you put the 5-number summary above. They gave you an axis, label that axis. It's asking you to describe or compare the distribution. So if you're comparing, you better do socks for both, and you need to compare between them, which means use some ER words, great or than, or it's lesser. Also caution, if you're doing box plots, there's a very good chance there are outliers there. So make sure, since you're giving Q1 and Q3, you do the 1.5 IQR rule. On the part B on this is asking, is it reasonable to use this sample of mandible lengths of modern Thai dogs to construct an interval? You are actually using the box plots that you would have created in part A on this. So is it reasonable? So first off, which type of interval are you looking for on this? Are you looking for a 1 sample Z interval for mu, or are you looking for a 1 sample T interval? In other words, do you know the population standard deviation or not? And this is a 1 sample T. You don't know the population standard deviation of the mandible lengths of the jawbones. So in this case, what are the conditions we should be checking? We should be checking random and independent and normal. Now it's the normal one. You see I have the underline. That's the one that they're trying to address. If you look at the box plot for this sample, it's roughly symmetric. There are no outliers. So it is reasonable that the distribution of mandible lengths for modern Thai dogs is approximately normal. And it's okay to construct a T confidence interval. Remember, t-tests are robust in certain situations for it. So part B is looking at that, about the normal, can we approximate normality with a t-confidence interval based off the box plot from part A for modern Thai dogs. Part C, is it reasonable to use the sample data mandible lengths of Thai dogs for a 2-sample t-test for the difference in mean mandible lengths? So now we're looking at a 2-sample on it. So are we looking for a 2-sample Z-test, 2-sample T-test? Now it told us a 2-sample T, and that's because we don't know the standard deviation of the populations. Now, something to be careful with, I want to address on this, why I like part C, and this is the main idea in the video, is there are 2 samples. So are both of them random, is what you want to check. Also, if there's 2 samples, are they independent from each other, between each other, and are they independent within? So there's really 3 things you're looking for independence. But again, I underlined normal calculations. Is it safe to use normal calculations? And since golden jackal has outliers and is not roughly symmetric, it is not safe on it. So you can read their answer on that one, but that's what they're trying to address is modern Thai dogs. It's good. You can do a T interval in that case, or you could even do a T test if you wanted to for that one. But you can't do it for both. Really specifically, you can't do it for golden jackals because it has those outliers and it's not roughly symmetric. So the robustness isn't there for the t-test. In the 2012 exam, I looked at question 5. It has a significance test and it gives you the null and the alternative. And I really liked this one. I felt like there wasn't a lot of calculations, which is something which we're kind of speculating there might not be on this exam for it. Now, the primary goal of this is to assess, can you describe a type 2 error and a consequence of it? Again, that was one we covered before. And can you draw an appropriate conclusion from a p-value and a flaw in a study? Can you find a flaw and its effect on inference? So if we look at part A, it says describe a type 2 error. So I kept the picture of the null and the alternative. Now, what they're looking for in this is they're looking for you to describe the error in context, referring to the proportion of adults in the city who are able to pass the fitness test. Again, that's what P is defined as for you right here. Remember, significance tests are always based off the population, not the sample. It's also looking for describing the consequences as not finding the program or continuing poor physical fitness of the adults on it. So you see an answer below, but those are the two things they're trying to see. Do you know when they ask this question? Part B, if we look at it, is asking what would the p-value of 0.97 lead you to conclude? So they ran the test, they found the p-value for you. Now they're asking you to conclude. I think this is something that might be big on this exam this year. This is me speculating. There's three things they're looking for here. They're looking for, can you link the size of the p-value to the conclusion and the alpha level? In other words, since the p-value is greater than the alpha level of 0.05, or since the p-value is less than the alpha level, like, can you conclude based off the p-value and the alpha level? Can you compare them and decide? It's asking, or it's asking, can you correctly interpret the p-value? Or it's asking, can you state the conclusion in context and describe lack of evidence for the alternative? So there are three possible things you could have answered on this one. Just one of them was needed though. And so you could read below, because the p-value of 0.97 is larger than the alpha level, they are comparing. We fail to reject the null. Bam, fail to reject, and it goes into the answer from there on it. So you can see how you should respond to it. Now, part C is interesting, is can you describe a flaw in the study that was described in part B? So I have to go back and read part B, and right away, as I go through and read it, I see this part right here. It says the word volunteer on it. And there are three things they're looking for. I don't just say, oh, it was volunteers. They are looking for three things, and all three had to be there in order for it to be an E. It wants to make sure you know they were not randomly selected. That condition was violated on it. So therefore, that is not random, it's volunteers, so that's not good. It also wants you to know, describe how the sample is different in regards to physical fitness or the ability to pass the fitness test of the volunteers compared to everybody in the population. Also, make sure you are addressing the idea of making inference. This was in a previous video for it. And it's even saying how. You are overestimating the population parameter on it. So you can read their answer below to get more understanding of it. So, resource highlights. There are two YouTube videos. One is match pairs versus two samples, if you're struggling with that. One is choosing inference. I also took the College Board AP Statistics sites, and you can look at significance tests for proportions. There is a link there. You can look at significance tests for means. You can look at the errors. So these are ones they went through as well, and watch those. But that is the end of the video for it. Make sure you take a look at the posters that are linked on the resources on it, the inference tests that are there on Schoology for it, and watch our old videos. Get our likes up and get our views up. We hope you're all doing well. Please, you have 2 days left. See us in office hours if you have questions.